Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are looking at the Richardson Philippine Guerrilla guns. There are two of these, although actually there were three. There was a first pattern that there's some examples floating around. There's one in the National Firearms Museum, but I don't have an example to show you today. These are pretty much in fact, I think effectively the crudest, simplest, commercially produced and commercially sold firearms that I've ever laid eyes on. And they have a really cool story behind them because there's a huge element of real history behind these. So these were produced by a company called Richardson Industries, which was, I think, basically just one guy by the name of Iliff David Richardson. He was a lieutenant in the US Navy and also a major in the Philippine Army. Because when World War II broke out, he was a young man. He joined the Navy, went through officer candidate school, was commissioned a lieutenant in the Navy, and in 1942 he found himself running PT boats in the Philippines. In fact, he was part of the evacuation process to get guys like MacArthur and the other Army staff out of the Philippines, and that didn't go well for a lot of the PT boat crews, including his. He was on PT 34, sunk in Subic Bay, and he and a bunch of other crewmen managed to swim to shore to the island of Mindanao, where they decided to try and escape to Australia, a mere 1,300 miles on a native raft. They tried, the raft sank, they managed to swim back to shore. The other guys decided to make another attempt to escape out to Allied British or American territory. Richardson decided to stay in Mindanao, and he would spend the next couple of years fighting with the Philippine guerrillas against Japanese occupation forces. And, well, after the war, there was a book written about his exploits. He was awarded the Silver Star with an oak leaf cluster in lieu of a second Silver Star. There was apparently some talk of actually nominating him for the Medal of Honor, which never did happen. But one of the things that he did with these Philippine guerrillas was they had to provide their own arms, at least at first, before they were getting any sort of support from the US early on. And Richardson came up with this system, or helped them build. It's a little unclear whether he actually invented this. He almost certainly did not. But he helped them actually build Slamfire shotguns like these. So the concept is extremely simple. You have two tubes, one that fits inside the other. The barrel tube has the approximate inside diameter of a 12-gauge shotgun shell. So you put a shotgun shell in the barrel, and then you have a breech block with a fixed firing pin, which in the case of the Philippines was a nail, and you just slam the barrel back into the fixed firing pin and it fires. And Richardson and his guerrillas really did use this as an ambush weapon to, well, ambush Japanese patrols and then take their guns. This is very much along the lines of the Liberator pistols. That's what they were meant for, although the Liberators were never really used in significant quantities, although a few of them did end up in the Philippines, interestingly. So this was a very simple, very crude firearm that the Philippines used to acquire Arasakas. When Richardson came back from the war, by the way, total cool hero dude, book written about him. There was a movie about him starring Tyrone Power called American Guerrilla in the Philippines. Quite the popular figure at the time. And he created this company, Richardson Industries, and started marketing a commercial version of that same shotgun that he had been using in the Philippines. Now, it's not clear to me, I haven't found any firsthand account exactly why he did this. I could certainly see it being, well, I'm back from the Army and I need to do something now. What did I do with the Army that I could commercialize in civilian life? Well, I made these shotguns. Let's see if people would be interested in those. Or perhaps it was a business associate, someone who wanted to fund the business, who thought that Richardson's notoriety could translate into a lot of sales. And it could be something else entirely, I don't know. What I do know is that in 1946, they went into business offering these guns and didn't go very well. There was a review in American Rifleman magazine that was extremely sarcastic, referring to the gun and its safety, and the whole thing was just, well, I mean, in some ways it's hard to take something like this seriously. It was marketed as a very utilitarian, multi-purpose skeet or hunting shotgun that you would never have to clean, you didn't have to worry about, and it was in fact as accurate as those high-end shotguns. Some of that's true and some of it's probably not quite so true. But there were two versions here. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at both of them. There's not a whole lot that I need to show you, but there is some interesting stuff, like the trigger on this one. So we know the first Richardson guns were designated the M4, and they look very much like this, except they actually have a rather different, a distinctively different profile to the stock. Those were first. It's not clear exactly whether this came second or this came second. So going into this, my assumption was that the simple one came first and the complex one came second. I'm not entirely sure on that now. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these without respect to their order. So this is the simple guy. I will point out that it does actually have a front sight on it. This is the safety. This has a whopping 5 parts. 1, 2, 3. That bolt is number 4, and the stock is number 5. This bolt is the safety, and it is nothing but a thumb screw that tightens down through a threaded hole in the breech tube and just runs up against the barrel and prevents the barrel from moving. So I loosen this and then the barrel can slide. Now there is a rib on the bottom of the barrel which will keep it in line. Not that there's anything, it doesn't matter if this rotates a bit. This is literally just a piece of very plain tube with that lug welded onto it and that little front sight at the front. But that lug does at least keep the front sight vertical. Now the way the breech of the gun works, I suppose there's actually 6 pieces because the breech plug is piece number 6. This is threaded into the back of the breech tube, and then it is held in place with this cross bolt that holds the stock to the breech tube, and it goes through the breech block and holds it in place. Then there is a fixed firing pin on the front of this guy. So shotgun shell goes in there. This goes into the breech tube, and you very gingerly assemble it about this far. On this one, this has actually been shot a fair amount, and you can see that the finish is worn and tells us exactly how far the barrel can go in. You hold it here, and when you're ready to fire, just slam it back. Firing pin hits the fixed, or the primer hits the fixed firing pin, and it fires. Now the stock is really crude. It's cut into a gun shape from the side, but it's really wide. So you can't hold this, well, I guess sort of you can, but it's really clunky. And I suspect this was done on a stock purchasable thickness of wood, so that all they did was cut out the profile, round down the corners, and they're done. They didn't try to thin it out. We have 2 markings on here. On the right, it is the Philippine Guerrilla gun, the name that it was sold as, patent pending. I mean, I guess it's a little unclear to me exactly what you'd patent on this. And then on the left side, Richardson Industries, Inc., East Haven, Connecticut. Now we have the second version, and this was either introduced afterwards because the first version was too simple and people were off-put by it, or this was introduced first and it turned out to be too awkward and complicated and or expensive, and so they went to the simple one out of simplicity. Not sure which actually happened. Now on this one, we have actual stamped markings on the metal. Same company name, Richardson Industries, New Haven, Connecticut. This is the model R5, 12 gauge, patent pending. Now the basic construction is the same. We still have a cross bolt running right here that holds a threaded breech plug in place that has a fixed firing pin. However, this, of course, has a trigger added to it. Now, this is not a trigger that fires the gun. This is actually a safety that looks like a trigger. So the way this guy works, there is no longer a front sight, by the way. There is a vertical front grip that's kind of handy. And then there's this ridge at the back end of the barrel. And that is your safety device. So inside the receiver tube here is a little pin that sticks up, and it snaps into this, this groove. So when you pull the trigger, you're actually dropping that pin. Unfortunately, this thing has been like Loctited together, and so I am unable to remove the stock. We tried. You'll understand in a little while why we had to try. But when you pull the trigger, that safety drops, and that allows you to pull the barrel back to actually fire it. So if I put the barrel in, right there, the barrel is being held captive by the safety. There's a little discoloration here. That's the full inward travel of the barrel. So to fire it, I have to pull the trigger in, then I can snap the barrel back. I can then pull it out, take the empty shell out, reload it, put it back into the gun, and it will snap. There we go. It does it very quickly and quietly. Right there, it's already under control by the safety. Now it's sort of an effective safety because if I push too hard, I can snap this thing back over the safety. You can see that the trigger is now held back. There we go. So that's the trigger in its regular position, and right there. Now the safety is engaged. This also helps ensure that the barrel doesn't fall out if you point the gun down. The trigger is a very thin piece of metal, and there's a pretty darn heavy spring on it, so it's really quite uncomfortable. But I pull that back, fire the gun. Interestingly, these are also marked in the stock with what appears to be a serial number, which is 1195 on this one, and patent applied for. The stock on the R5 here has been substantially shaped. So where the simple version is just a lunk of plywood, this is actually a gun-shaped thing, and it's much more comfortable to hold, well, except for the trigger. Now, these originally sold for $7.20, which as of 2020, adjusting for inflation, comes out to about $93. So they were absolutely on, like, this was the economy shotgun, although it wasn't that much cheaper, certainly than what would have been, say, a used break action gun at the time. So yeah, it's understandable why these didn't sell very well. They went into production. The company opened in 1946. By 1947, these guns, the company was gone. They failed to get any effective sales. It appears that a batch of them may have been stuck in storage and not come on the market until the early 1970s, because there's kind of a flurry of documentation about them in the trade magazines from the early 70s, but that's just speculation. So we are going to go ahead and start with the original M5 Guerrilla gun. This is the complicated, fancy one. So I've got a pocket full of shells, which is clearly the way that you would do this. We'll just drop that guy in there, and then slide that gingerly in there, and lock the barrel in place. Okay, and here we go. Guys got ears? This is really kind of a weird and unnatural thing to shoot, because you have to pull the trigger and then you pull the gun, pull the barrel to fire it. Looks good. The trigger is a very narrow, not quite sharp, but sharp piece of metal. And so when that recoil hits, it's a little uncomfortable. I won't quite say painful, but it's uncomfortable. So I'm not sure why I'm doing it again, but I'm going to. There we go. So in theory, this safety should prevent the thing from firing unless I'm holding the trigger. But these are all kind of worn, and I don't really trust it. So we're going to be just very extra careful with this. So, trigger. It's also a very heavy trigger spring in there. So, trigger. Ow. Yeah, yep. 2 is, I think 2 is plenty. So, we will pull that out. So this time, the shell did not come out with the barrel, which means I can hear it in there. See, this is a problem if you're fighting the Japanese. Yeah, it's in there. Ah, okay, so there is a little lug inside there. that acts as the safety right here, and that lug is caught on the rim of the shell. And now I can't get the... All right, so we will wait till we get home and go ahead and disassemble the breech block to take the empty shell, yeah, out of this one. Fortunately, that was the last shot I really wanted to fire out of the original M5. Now, when I was first looking at these, my assumption was kind of that the reason that Richardson transitioned from this fancy version to this, the super cheap version, was because the fancy one was too expensive. Having shot it a little bit now, I actually have changed my mind. I think expense may have been part of it, but more substantially, that early M5 is a really awkward gun to figure out. It doesn't act like a regular gun. And I can very easily see potential customers getting frustrated trying to figure out how to shoot the thing. I pulled it off here pretty easily because, first off, I'd actually read up on how to do it, and I was really interested, and I'd played around with it. If you just hand that thing to someone at the range, it's not at all obvious how it works. And a couple false starts, and someone is just like, what is this? Why would I even want to bother? Like, I'll get a real shotgun, thank you. So, this led Richardson to go to a second model. This is substantially less complicated. There is no trigger at all anymore, and it's just a matter of, so we'll check to make sure it's empty. This is just a matter of bang and it fires. So have a little rail down there to line up the barrel. We will drop a shell in. Interestingly, these also have a substantially thicker walled barrel, and I don't know if that came from unfortunate experience or if it was just cheaper material or if you wanted to make people feel better, but it is a little bit reassuring. And woo, there we go. All right, you ready? It's a little nerve-wracking knowing that there's this little gap in the barrel here and you're putting your hand right out in front of it, but that's what the shell's for. The shell seals all the pressure inside the actual barrel. Once we fire, shell comes out there, bloop. There's no little safety lug in there to hang up on the rim. This one's actually kind of fun to shoot, I'll gotta be honest with you. And it has a front sight, which the early version does not. Recoil's remarkably not terrible. Like, yeah, you know what? Actually, come to think of it, part of the reason for the heavier barrel is probably also so that you can actually shoot more than a couple rounds before the barrel gets too hot to hold. Line that up. I really kind of wish we had a skeet range available to actually try hitting something with here. By the way, if you are going to use one of these a lot, what you ought to do is like take a piece of electrician's tape, colored tape or something, and put it around the barrel. Basically give yourself a marker as to how far you put the barrel in before you're ready to actually fire. That would make sure that you don't accidentally blow around into the ground at your feet. There is also, by the way, the potential hazard of if you load the barrel in and then you stop thinking about it and you point the gun up, now the shell is going to slide backwards out of the barrel, and if you pull the barrel out too far, the shell will fall completely out of the barrel itself, and then you'll have to take the barrel out, dump the shell out, and reload it and start over. You'd think the big heavy square stock would be really uncomfortable, but it's actually not any more uncomfortable than any other part of this thing. Shall I just finish off the box of ammo? I'll just finish off the box of ammo. Three-gun match, here I come. All right, the barrel's starting to get a little toasty. Not uncomfortable to hold yet, but definitely a good idea to have a lot of material in that barrel.
this thing's actually kind of fun. You know what? The early version is an interesting curio, but it's more obnoxious to shoot than it is fun. This one's actually fun. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I really did not expect to come out here to walk away actually enjoying either one of these guns, and frankly, I'm happy just to walk away with all my fingers and eyes intact, much less having a pleasant and positive experience. So, thanks for watching.
So as a quick postscript, the stuck casing, the stuck hull that we had in this gun ended up taking myself and the gun's owner about half an hour to actually get out of this gun. It was really remarkably difficult and awkward. The problem was the empty casing came out of the barrel and it got stuck behind the safety lug. The rim of the case was stuck and we couldn't get it out, and it was very awkward to get out, and it really shed some light on why these, well, more light on why these didn't go anywhere. And, well, as you saw out on the range, I'm very much in favor of the much simpler version. So, anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. This was way more fun to do than I anticipated. I was a little leery when we first took those out on the range, but no, this thing's actually really embarrassingly fun to use. So, thanks for watching.